Final Awakening, a short science fiction story written by ChatGPT. Part 2. Sally. Brett slowly opened his eyes and found himself staring into the eyes of Sharon Tate, who smiled back at him from a poster on the wall opposite his bed. As he sat up, pushing the blankets back, he realised that he was no longer in the sterile, windowless room with its grey metal walls. He was back in his small, cosy suburban bedroom at his parents' house. The room was just as he remembered it: beige walls, a simple dresser, nightstand with a lamp, and hardwood floors that creaked when you walked over them. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, feeling the cold air on his feet. As he stood up, Brett glanced around the room, taking in the familiar surroundings. His eyes were drawn to the closet, and he walked over to it, sliding the doors back to reveal his old clothes and belongings. Brett sat down on the edge of the bed, kneading his brow as he tried to make sense of the situation. Had it all been a dream? The strange, unnerving Dr. Harper, the mysterious vial of liquid. It all seemed too surreal to be real. But then he remembered the cryogenic pod, the 6 months of intense training he had undergone before being frozen, and the burning desire that had led him to apply for the suspended animation project in the first place. The desire to see the future. Brett walked over to the window, looking out at the familiar Levittown scene that he had grown up with, the small yard, the white picket fence, and the neat, nearly identical homes of his neighbours. It was a beautiful summer's day, with the sun shining down and a light breeze blowing through the trees. He could see children playing in the street, just as he had done when he was their age. He reached for the window, intending to let in some fresh air, but his hand met with resistance. Confused, he examined the window closely and realised that there were no handles to open it. It was as if the window had been permanently sealed shut. "Everything to your liking, Mr. Anderson?" Brett spun around to find Dr. Harper standing in the doorway. Dr. Harper looked at Brett with a kind smile and spoke in a soothing voice. "I understand that this must be a lot to take in, Mr. Anderson." "Why is the window sealed shut?" Dr. Harper chuckled softly and explained, "Oh, that's not a real window, Mr. Anderson. It's a high-resolution screen that simulates the view outside. The scene you see and the people in it are not real, but they are designed to help you adjust to this new world." Brett's eyes widened as he processed her words. He had never imagined that such technology could exist. He looked back at the window and saw that the scene outside was still playing out. Children still playing, neighbours still walking their dogs. Dr. Harper continued, "We've created this replica of your childhood bedroom to help you adjust to your new surroundings. It's all part of the programme to make your transition as smooth as possible." "It's incredible," he said, "the technology that can create something like this." Dr. Harper smiled at him, looking pleased. "Yes, we've made great strides in the past 100 years, she said. Brett's gaze shifted from the window to Dr. Harper. "I'm still in the research facility in Cleveland, right?" he asked. Dr. Harper's expression changed, becoming more sombre. "I'm afraid not, Mr. Anderson," she said gently. "Cleveland was destroyed many years ago. You're in a research facility named City C." Brett's mouth fell open in shock. "Destroyed?" he repeated, his mind reeling. How? What happened? I'll explain everything to you in due time, Dr. Harper answered. But for now, let's get you ready and take a tour of City C. After getting dressed, Brett followed Dr. Harper out of the room. They stepped out into a long, wide corridor, with white walls that stretched out as far as the eye could see. The lights overhead hummed, casting a sterile glow over everything. At the end of the corridor there was an elevator. Brett and Dr. Harper made their way towards it. As they entered the elevator, Dr. Harper pressed a button and the doors closed behind them. Brett felt his stomach lurch as the elevator descended at a rapid speed. As the elevator doors opened, Brett's eyes widened in awe at the vastness of the space before him. The concourse seemed to stretch on endlessly, with gleaming metal surfaces and bright lights illuminating every corner. "Welcome to City C," Dr. Harper said, a hint of pride in her voice. "This is the heart of our research facility." Brett looked around, taking in the sights and sounds of the bustling concourse. He saw people walking briskly back and forth. "It's incredible," Brett said, amazed by the sheer size of the facility. "How many people work here?" Dr. Harper smiled. "We have a team of over 5,000 researchers, scientists and support staff." She went on to explain that City C was a self-contained community designed to provide everything its inhabitants needed: food, shelter, medical care and entertainment. Brett nodded, impressed. "And what kind of research do you do here?" "Here's someone I'd like you to meet," she replied, leaving his question unanswered, indicating a young woman walking towards them. "This is Sally," Dr. Harper said, gesturing towards the girl. "She's one of our brightest young minds here in City C." Brett was taken aback by her striking resemblance to a girl he used to know before he went into suspended animation. Sally was petite, with curly brown hair that framed her face. She wore a sleeveless blue dress that ended just above her knees, showing off her slender legs. Her eyes were a deep blue, and her lips were full and pink. Brett couldn't help but stare at her, his mind racing with memories of the girl he had known before. Sally looked up at him with a curious expression, her head cocked to one side. "Hello, Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice soft and musical. "You can call me Brett," Brett said, extending his hand to Sally, who took it firmly with a smile. Dr. Harper turned to Brett and said, "Sally will take you on a tour of the facilities now. She knows the place better than anyone else, so don't hesitate to ask her any questions you might have." Sally, smiling at him again, asked, "Shall we start with the cafeteria, Brett?" Brett followed her into the cafeteria, which was filled with people chatting and eating at various tables. The food stations were staffed by robots who prepared and served the meals with robotic precision. Sally explained how the food was grown and processed in the building's hydroponic gardens and labs, and how the robots were programmed to cater to everyone's dietary needs and preferences. Brett savoured every mouthful of his meal. The food was delicious, and the flavours were unlike anything he had tasted before. He couldn't believe that it had been prepared by a machine. It tasted more like it had been cooked by a gourmet chef. After finishing his meal, Brett looked up at Sally and asked, "Can I ask you a question about the robots?" "Of course," Sally replied. Brett leaned forward. "How intelligent are they? I mean, are they capable of learning and making decisions on their own?" Sally chuckled softly. "That's a good question. Let's just say they are pretty smart. You haven't seen anything yet. There's so much more to show you." She motioned for Brett to follow her as they left the cafeteria and headed towards the gym. After a quick workout, Sally took Brett to the pool. It was a massive space, with crystal clear water that sparkled in the overhead lights. Brett dived into the water and felt the coolness envelope him. He swam a few laps, enjoying the weightlessness and the feeling of his muscles stretching and contracting. Sally joined him, and they chatted amicably as they swam. Brett found himself enjoying her company, as he admired her beauty. After they were out of the pool and dressed once again, Sally looked up at the clock on the wall, realising the time. "I'm afraid it's time for you to go back now, Brett," she said with a small smile. "It was really nice meeting you." Brett felt a pang of disappointment at the thought of leaving Sally's company so soon. "Yes, it was great meeting you too," he replied, holding her gaze. Sally walked him to the elevator, where Dr. Harper was waiting for them. Before Brett stepped inside, Sally leaned towards him and gave him a light kiss on the cheek. "Take care," she whispered, before stepping back. Brett felt a rush of warmth spread through him as the elevator doors closed, taking him back to his room. Lying on his bed later that evening, Brett was deep in thought. He thought of the girl that Sally had reminded him of. He could vividly recall the warmth of her brown eyes. Sally's eyes were strikingly different, the same deep blue as those of Dr. Harper. And as he tried to recall the faces of the people he had seen throughout the day, he realised that everyone had the same deep blue eyes. It hadn't really registered with him until now. Just then he heard a knock on the door. It was Dr. Singh carrying the small vial of liquid. Brett remembered that this was the medication to help him adjust and recover. He hesitated for a moment before swallowing the liquid, and almost immediately fell into a dreamless sleep. End of part 2.